It being a little bit late, we're going to start. Whoa, got a little problem there. It being a little bit late, we're going to start and call um, the executive session of the House Fish and Game Committee into order. We're going to take the bills down in numerical order from top to bottom as they show up on your sheet right before that.
The clerk would like us to do a roll call so she can check our names on the list.
Sure. Absolutely. So we'll take a minute and allow the clerk to do a roll call to find out which members are present and which substitutes we have and who they're substituting for. So I'll turn it over to the clerk to go ahead and do a vote. Roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Khan. Thank you. Representative Close. Representative Spillane. Representative Howard. Representative Craig. Representative Love.
Here.
Representative Wolf. Representative Kittredge. Representative Allard. Representative Smith. Representative Harvey. Representative Laflamme. Representative Massimilla substituting for Representative Daughtonville. Representative King. The clerk is here. Representative Egan. Representative Shurtleff. I believe Representative Ellis is absent. Do we not have a substitute? Okay, and Representative Oxel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Clerk. You're all ready and ready to go for that? All right, great. So we're in executive session. We're going to be going through the bills, and we'll open each bill individually, have a conversation about it, make motions, and go forward. I'm going to make one comment to the members. I went back and listened to some of our January 14th conversation. The one thing I learned was that if you're not talking straight into the mic, nobody in the YouTube world can hear what you're saying on motions. So I'd ask you that when we're voting and when you're speaking to make sure you're talking directly into the mic. And when you're all done, kill it. Make sure the red light's off because we only have 3 mics on at a time. The 4th person won't be able to speak. So make sure you remember to turn your mic off. With that being said, let's get and jump right into the order of the day. Is there any other business we need to do before we jump into the bills? So, thank you very much. Representative Abul, would you lead us into pledge, please? Representative Khan? No, please. No, we're not doing the national anthem. All right. First up is House Bill 1297. I'm going to open the executive session on House Bill 1297 relative to the taking of lobster while engaged in recreational scuba diving. To start the discussion, I'm going to recognize Representative Spillane for the purposes of a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move OTP.
It's been moved OTP and Representative Love.
And I second.
It's been seconded by Representative Love. The bill is now on the table as an OTP and is open to further amendment. Recognize Representative Spillane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment that was drafted that you should have in front of you. The amendment simply puts the ability to regulate the seasons and bag limits in the direct rulemaking authority of Fish and Game so that it's not hard-coded and there's no specific period of time or bag limit, and Fish and Game can manage it based on how they manage all their other species.
Thank you, Representative Spillane. Any
And
further comment?
I would move the amendment.
Oh, thank you.
It is 2022-0157H.
So Representative Spillane have moved Amendment 0157H. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Representative Love, and it's open for discussion. Representative Spillane, would you like to speak to your amendment again?
Okay, as I said, Mr. Chair, this simply gives rulemaking authority to regulate the taking of lobster by diving to the Fish and Game Department so that the director can set in rules what the bag limit and or season is through the normal process like they do all of our other species.
Thank you. Any further comment on HB 1297 and Amendment 157? Representative Harvey.
Thank you. I do appreciate the amendment. I think I agree with the representative that it is up to Fish and Game to set limits and seasons and so forth. However, I attend as many commission meetings as I can, and this year I even attended the legislative meeting where our present legislation was presented and public input was allowed to be given. And the person who spoke for marine fisheries was very adamant that there were problems with this, even with the amendment, and she listed them very clearly. One was that if scuba divers are searching for lobsters, they could possibly disturb underwater habitat, which to me is a problem. She also mentioned that our juvenile lobsters are on decline, and so this would further that decline, also maybe put our lobster fishermen at a disadvantage. And then there's the enforcement issue of you can't look at a trap when you realize that there's a diver down below. You can't bring a boat up to there to check a trap. So I will not be able to support this, even with the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Reed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too was concerned initially when we first heard the testimony about the disturbing of lobster breeding grounds and the sediment and potentially, I guess, almost cruel manner of taking. But we heard from one of the most preeminent wildlife biologists and conservationists in the state, Weldon Bosworth, whose conservation and knowledge, I absolutely, it's unimpeachable. And not only did he describe the actual method of take, which involves, and other divers did too, which involves teasing them out, but further, and I believe we might have more information to this, divers are currently allowed to take crab. The crab occupy the same areas as the lobster, and the method of take is the same as well. Given that and the knowledge that the divers who are interested in this actually are scheduling a meeting with the advisory committee to go into detail, I think it is probably good that we allow this to go through with the amendment and allow the Senate to fine-tune anything that they might discover in meeting.
Thank you, Representative Reed. Representative Spillane is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Representative Reed's point, I will point the committee to RSA 211:18-C, crabs. Notwithstanding any provisions of this chapter, to the contrary, any person may take 12 crabs a day by angling, diving, or by hand. So Fish and Game already checks divers when they come up to make sure they've only got 12 crabs. They've already got the ability to count to 12, so they can count to any number that we set for lobsters. And I don't think there's any problem where they can already take crab. It's already in our statute. Let them take some lobsters as well. Thank you.
Representative Shurtleff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding we are only voting on the amendment right now.
That is correct. That's the motion that's on the floor, is the amendment
So
itself.
I'll only address, I think the amendment actually makes the bill better, and I will vote for the amendment, but I will be voting against, ought to pass as amended. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Shurtleff. Representative Khan.
Mr. Chairman, I'll wait when it comes to the real bill. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amendment number 0157H? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll.
The motion is adoption of Amendment 0157H. Mr. Vice Chair.
Excuse me one second, clerk, I apologize. Members, please remember to use your mic and speak into the mic so that people who are watching and listening and the permanent record can be able to hear your vote.
Thank you.
The answer is yes.
Thank you. Representative Close.
Yes.
Representative Spillane.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative Craig.
Yes.
Representative Love.
Yes.
Representative Wolf.
Yes.
Representative Kittredge. Representative Allard.
Yes.
Representative Smith.
Yes.
Representative Harvey.
Yes.
Representative Laflamme.
Yes.
Representative Massimilla.
Yes.
Representative King.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Egan.
Yes.
Representative Shirtliff,
Yes.
Representative Oxel.
Yes.
The vote is 18-0.
Chair votes yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. The vote is 19-0. I have to scroll all the way back up to see you, Mr. Chair.
On a vote to 19-0, the amendment is adopted, and we're on to an OTPA motion now on House Bill 1297, and is open to further debate and discussion.
Well, actually, I move OTPA.
You don't have to move. It's already OTP, and we adopted amendment. The new motion is OTPA. So it's just we're discussing the bill as amended at this point. Representative Egan, you have a question?
No, I have commentary on this bill.
Have at
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two grave concerns with this bill, Mr. Chair. We already know, have heard in many testimonies of many bills in front of Fish and Game, the lack or reduction in workforce and the number of conservation officers that are needed to supply the state with the safety. And there's a concern that we are going to stretch them even more thin when they have to walk the beaches to try and check on making sure that egg-filled mother lobsters aren't being taken accidentally by novice lobstermen. I was glad to hear that the lobstermen in the professional sense are welcoming conservation officers and marine resource officials to come on their boats and check their catches and educate them if they are making errors. And I think that is a good thing that happens and a good use of their time. And by allowing individuals to then catch lobsters on the beach, it's going to stretch their time even thin, time that we already know is stretched thin through the lack of conservation officers that we fund in the state. And I have a grave concern on how that will begin to affect the bigger picture of safety. The second one is actually a safety issue. I have 3 close friends that are scuba divers. No one is ever directly under their flag where it's posted. That means there's a diver in the area. My concern is if folks want to scuba dive to catch lobsters, they're not going to go out in the middle of the ocean where nobody is. They're going to go where they think the lobsters are. That means they're going to go near where the lobstermen's boats are, which means they could get tangled in cages, tangled in ropes, and I think it's a safety issue for me in terms of allowing them to get access to areas that fishermen are working, and it just bothers me. I know that scuba divers are safe-minded folks, but they're never directly under their flag, so fishermen will not know exactly where they are, and if they're looking for lobsters, they may not exactly know where all the lobstermen's traps are. So those 2 concerns of the amount of staff that it would take to police this bill and the safety concerns, I think you can understand that I would not be able to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Egan. Matt, can you turn your mic off? Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the safety concerns, what I understand from the many states that already allow this has almost never been an issue, and I certainly trust the department to be able to regulate how close a diver is allowed to get to a boat or vice versa. In terms of the rest, when I first heard the testimony, I was kind of surprised because my natural instinct would be to think that commercial operations would be far more disruptive than single individual diver taking in a way very similar to how they've done it for thousands of years. And again, after I heard the testimony of the divers and Weldon Bosworth, again, whose conservation understanding cannot be, is just unquestionable, it seems that my original suspicion that in fact those individuals cause far less disruption to the natural environment is actually correct. And I can understand how the commercial lobster industry might have a lot of pull and influence with the department. But for those reasons, I will be supporting OTPA.
Thank you, Representative Reed. Representative Spillane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will direct once again, in answer to the comment that the Fish and Game doesn't have enough staff to police it, RSA 21118-C, we're already taking crab by diving, and Fish and Game is already monitoring that situation. There's no extra staff situation that I see necessary when they're already checking divers for their take on crab. In response to the diver safety situation, I will point out that no diver's going to dive and look for crab in the wide open water where the traps were likely going to be laid. They tend to dive closer to shore along the cliff lines and such, and then tickle the lobsters out with a tickle stick so that they can take them by hand. You won't find lobster boats fishing right next to the rocks on the shore because that's where they're going to get damaged. And they're not going to lay a trap there because it's not a good place to drop a trap where it can get caught in the rocks. So that's my testimony, and I will be supporting OTPA.
Thank you, Representative Spillane. Representative Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the equal concern about this bill that other representative mentioned about the safety, and also that we might, in the process, we might destroy the habitat. New Hampshire seacoast is very small seacoast, like just say 17 mile. The lobster industry is working very well. We should be happy the way things are going. If we touch this, we might be destroying the industry, and we'll be sorry and later. So I'm not going to vote for this bill.
Thank you, Representative Khan. Any further discussion? Representative Harvey.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the information concerning the crab industry and the idea that we hunt crabs, so therefore we should be able to hunt lobsters as well. But none of that addresses the issue that was brought up at Fish and Game concerning the decline in juvenile lobsters. And this is a bill that would hasten that decline. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, the chair is going to just make a statement. Again, on this amendment, on this bill, I have every faith in Fish and Game and be able to write regulations to be able to manage the species and manage what's going on within their staffing concerns and everything else. I believe that, when you're talking about the taking of lobster, especially when you bring in the fact that we take crab in a similar manner with crab pots and by taking, that the method isn't any different. Currently, the same dive regulations about where a boat can go if a man's just out diving is the same whether we're taking lobster or not, right? You have to maintain a certain distance. So that doesn't change anything about the safety involving the interaction between divers and lobstermen. The last thing I'll say, it was clear from the testimony that we heard that the environmental police in Massachusetts have had 0 reported cases of incidents between lobstermen and scuba divers, right? They haven't had this. Hasn't been a problem. They were more likely to have an incident between a lobsterman and a lobsterman than they were between a lobster and a fisherman. So I think the bill goes way to supporting our citizens and their right to not have to own a $60,000 boat or more to be able to go out and take lobster and use that natural resources we have here in New Hampshire. And lastly, I have every firm confidence and belief that Fish and Game will manage it through the regulatory process and rules that'll go before JALCAR and have another legislative look to support this program. So with that being said, we're going to move to a vote. Madam Clerk, if you could call the roll. The motion is OTPA on House Bill 1297.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair. Representative Close.
Yes.
Representative Spillane.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative Craig.
Yes.
Representative Love.
Yes.
Representative Wolf. Can you speak into your microphone?
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Kittredge.
Yes.
Representative Allard.
Yes.
Representative Smith.
Yes.
Representative Harvey.
No.
Representative Laflamme.
No.
Representative Massimilla.
No.
Representative King.
No.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Egan.
No.
Representative Shurtleff. And Representative Oxall.
No.
And Mr. Chair,
Chair votes yes.
the vote is 11 to 8.
With a vote 11 to 8, the House Bill 1297 passes with an OTPA motion. Will there be a minority report, and who will be drafting it? So Representative Harr will be drafting minority report. Representative Spillane will be drafting a majority report. Please have those to us by the end of the day today.
If I can just have a second to write down the minority report.
Yep.
Representative Harvey is the motion ITL by the minority.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. All right, I'm ready.
All right, next up is House Bill 1299. So I'm going to close the executive session on House Bill 1297 and open the executive session on House Bill 1299. The chair will make a motion of OTP. Look to Representative Craig.
Second.
So it's been moved OTP on House Bill 1299, seconded by Representative Craig. The chair will further move amendment number 2022-0150H. Representative Craig.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the amendment. It's open to further discussion and debate. I'll just speak to my amendment. So again, this bill, I want to be careful. We talk about invasive species and putting the herd at risk and all of those conversations we heard in the last in the public hearing. But the reality is this is a process bill. This isn't about the denial or the approval process. This is just about the fact that we want a process in place. We heard testimony from the last gentleman of the day where he was denied a permit from Fish and Game, and then there was a dead end. There was no place to go. He had conflicting science he wanted to present, and basically was told, no, we don't care. We're not going to do it. And I felt that was an inappropriate action, and that there should be some sort of process for citizens who, again, we're leaning on the executive director heavily, so he makes that ruling and he's responsible for it as a single individual, and that there should be an appeal process for that. So this is about an appeal process and about the permitting process and requiring Fish and Game to respond in a timely fashion. I expanded by the amendment. The amendment expands it to 60 days, which I think is reasonable. In my conversation with Colonel Jordan this morning, he felt that was a reasonable accommodation to move it out to 60 days. They already have their list of species that are denied, right, just outright because they know it's a problem. And they could still rely on that and immediately deny a permit. But it allows the citizen the ability to, if they feel the denial is not based in science. And I'm going to give you an example as to why this bill came forward. Is in that conversation with that last gentleman on reindeer, Fish and Game on their website has CDW-free states listed, which means that prion disease doesn't exist in those states by whatever means they determine that prion disease doesn't exist in those states. The gentleman that was trying to import the reindeer was importing from one of those states, and yet the very reason that Fish and Game gave was they were afraid of prion disease from a state that is listed on their website as not having prion disease. So there was conflict there in the science, and there was no place to turn. There was, once the denial was given, it was given, and there was no place to go. And so the idea behind this bill is to give our citizens the right to have a hearing, a secondary hearing if they disagree. Like in this case, there was conflict in the direct science of Fish and Game. In one place on their website, they said there's no prion disease, and another, and yet they were denying a permit based on prion disease. It's illogical on its face. And so this bill came out of that. And again, it's a process. It's not about prion disease. It's about making sure citizens have good processes in the state and have the ability to be heard. So with that, I'll open it up to any other comments or questions. Representative Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had concern about this bill when we were hearing the testimony last time we met here. But because of this amendment, and it satisfied me, I'm going to vote yes on this bill.
Thank you, Representative Khan. Any further discussion? Representative Reed.
I have a genuine, real question of the chair. So I remember in the testimony that this was changing the default position to yes. Does the amendment change that?
So the amendment is the same. So again, it requires Fish and Game respond. One of the problems with the current law was that they could hold a permit for 6 months. They could hold it for a year. There was no requirement for them to actually act. And so we wanted to change. I wanted to change that. I wanted to, if someone is looking to do something, they shouldn't have to wait a year for Fish and Game to respond, yes or no. And so what this bill does is it defaults it to yes. If Fish and Game does not respond within 60 days, then the default answer is yes, they get their permit. It puts an onus on Fish and Game to actually act on the citizen's request, which I think is appropriate. Any further discussion on this bill? We're voting, I'm sorry, Representative Shurtleff, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As before, I'm going to vote for the amendment because the amendment does improve the bill. But on the underlying bill, the OTPA motion, I'll vote against it. What I would like to see is this bill go to interim study. I think an appeals process is necessary, but I think it's something that needs a little bit more work. And I'm not even sure if the 60 days is adequate, and I would like to hear from Fish and Game in testimony about that aspect. So as I said, I'll vote for the amendment, vote against the bill, and I hope there'd be a motion for interim study. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Harvey.
I do believe the amendment makes it better. 60 days, though, to me, actually sounds short, considering the staffing issues at Fish and Game. I'd probably like to see 90 days. And I do question that in the underlying bill, if the Fish and Game Commission, I do think there should be an appeals process, but I question whether the Fish and Game Commission is the right body to be hearing such an appeal. And so I also, because of that, will vote for the amendment, but I don't plan to vote for the underlying bill. I would prefer interim study because, again, I think 60 days is actually too short. And I'd like to have more time to think about this and have more input on that from Fish and Game. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hart. Just to answer your question about that. So again, I did have a conversation with Fish and Game and understanding that in their 800 rules that they have a pretty substantial list of, you just can't bring these animals in, which they would use as their basis. And every time they review, they're only going to be reviewing the animals that aren't on that list. And every time they review an animal that's not on their list, guess where it's going to be added to their list if they deny it. So that list will grow and with time and make the process easier and easier as Fish and Game goes along. And the only animals they need the 60 days for are the ones that are not on the list that are already in their rules. So just to make it understand that it's not like they have to take every single species and investigate it. They've already done a significant portion of the work, and it's already in rules. And they can still rely on that for their denial process. So it's only the incremental new animals that aren't on their list that they need time to research, and I think 60 days to research an animal is pretty reasonable.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you.
Representative Reed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to reserve my comments for discussion on the bill, but I guess we're discussing both at once. So, I mean, obviously the amendment makes it better. I do think 60 days is probably reasonable based on what we heard during the hearing. I understand the commission doesn't want to be that body, but there's really no one else to put it before if the executive director is the person saying no. The only entity to go to after that is the commission, really. My concern, and I understand why this was placed in the bill, because this is kind of the stick, right? That it has to be, you have to respond or it's going to default to yes. But I am still a little bit uneasy about that default to yes, because if paperwork gets lost or something, could someone bring in a species? And as we all know, it only takes one species, one member of a species even, to bring in something that's potentially devastating to our ecosystem or even human health. So I'm genuinely torn because I do think this needs to be addressed, but I'm still kind of nervous about the default to yes.
Any further discussion? So we're voting on the amendment, amendment number 2022-0150H, and I'll have the clerk call the roll. The motion is to adopt the amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes.
Representative Close,
Yes.
Representative Spillane,
Yes.
Representative Howard,
Yes.
Representative Craig,
Yes.
Representative Love,
Yes.
Representative Wolf,
Yes.
Representative Kittredge,
Yes.
Representative Allard,
Yes.
Representative Smith,
Yes.
Representative Harvey,
Yes.
Representative Laflamme,
Yes.
Representative Massimilla,
Yes.
Representative King.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Egan,
Yes.
Representative Shurtleff,
Yes.
and Representative Oxall,
Yes.
and Mr. Chair.
Chair votes yes.
The vote is 19-0.
On a vote, the 19-0, amendment number 0150 is adopted, and we're on to an OTPA motion of the original bill, and it's open for further discussion. Is there anybody who covers anything? The one thing I'll remind members is that this isn't the end of the bill. It still goes over to the Senate and still has a conversation. It's still open to amendment over in the Senate. So again, if members feel that the bill has merit, they can still go over to the Senate and help and amend the concerns out of the bill that you have over there. So, Representative Harvey.
Thank you, and I understand that. It does bother me a little bit, though, that we do our work and then hope that the Senate will fix it. I would prefer that we do the best work that we can and send that over rather than saying, well, there may or may not be problems, so maybe you guys can do something about it. I still would like to see an interim study for this because there seems to be some concerns that were brought forward, and I think those concerns should be answered and could be answered through an interim study. Thank you.
Thank you, and I might be a little biased, but I think this is a perfect bill. Representative Shurtleff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, just to echo the comments of the member from Newmarket, I agree that the idea that it's an automatic yes if Fish and Game does not act within a timely manner is concerning, and I know that our friend and colleague on this committee from Newbury remembers decades ago when someone had the bright idea of taking a pail full of rock bass and dumping them into Lake Sunapee, and that now it completely destroyed the Lake Sunapee trout. And I hate to see someone get an automatic pass to import something that could be an invasive species and cause damage to our New Hampshire wildlife. So I'll be voting no. And again, my hope is that there be a motion to come forward for interim study. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Laflamme, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also agree with the representative from Newmarket and the representative from Pennacook. And I would like to add the fact that through RSAs and through rulemaking, we have given the executive director certain powers to make decisions. And I really don't like the idea of the Fish and Game Commission being able to override decisions on the made by the executive director. I understand the necessity of an appeal process, but I'm really uncomfortable with the Fish and Game Commission being given power to override decisions that are granted to the executive director. Thank you.
Further comments? Representative Love.
Yeah, regarding the pail of rock bass that were dumped in Sunapee, I doubt they looked for any permits to do it. You know, people have done that in the northern part, but Back Lake, for instance, rock bass is an invasive species in Winnipesaukee. Those people didn't. I don't think they came to Fish and Games asking if we can dump these in, and they'll continue to do those things with or without this.
Representative Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand this bill doesn't give any permission to bring anything in New Hampshire. It only does is that we respond to our citizens. Fish and Game or Fish and Game Commission, even this committee, we all work for the citizens. So we have citizens have the right to know our decision, promptly. So that's why I'm going to vote yes.
Anything further? So just Chair, I'll reserve the last comment. Again, this is a process bill. This is about recognizing our citizens that they have a right to be timely responded to by our state agencies and not be held up for undeterminable amount of time. And, I think this is a good process bill. While I recognize Representative Laflamme's comment about the commission, bottom line is the commission is the policy arm, right? Every bill we see comes with a commission recommendation on setting policy. So they set policy on a regular basis, or they established a policy what is going to happen in Fish and Game. So giving them a policy decision or evaluating a decision made by the agency head, I don't think is unreasonable. I think, again, it's not out of their wheelhouse. These are the policies they're already discussing. On what, when rulemaking authority occurs, the commission weighs in on what animals are added to that list on the adoption of rules. So again, I think this is well within the commission's policy wheelhouse of looking at what's going on and how it's responding to our citizens and whether the science is accurate or not, because I'm presuming they're already looking at science to establish our policies and making evaluations on that. So I think this is, again, a process bill. It's not about any individual species. It's about making sure our citizens are heard, and obviously I'll be voting yes to the OTPA motion. That being said, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Vice Chair? Representative?
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Close?
Yes.
Representative Spillane?
Yes.
Representative Howard?
Yes.
Representative Craig?
Yes.
Representative Love?
Yes.
Representative Wolf?
Yes.
Representative Kittredge?
Yes.
Representative Allard?
Yes.
Representative Smith?
Yes.
Representative Harvey?
No.
Representative Laflamme?
No.
Representative Massamilla?
No.
Representative King?
No.
The clerk votes no. Representative Egan?
Yes.
Representative Shurtleff?
No.
Representative Oxall?
Yes.
And Mr. Chair?
Yes.
The vote is 11 to 8.
On a vote to 11-8, who will be writing the minority report? The bill is, as amended, is adopted and going to the House with the ODPA recommendation. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I want to,
19.
could the clerk double check the roll call vote, because I come up
Thank-
with a different number?
Thank you. I obviously typed a number wrong. No, I have myself in the right column. I apologize. The count is apparently 12 to 7, right? No?
Oxell voted yes as well. And so did Egan. And Egan.
Oh, 13 to 6.
11 Republicans voted yes, plus Representative Egan and Representative Oxell.
13 to 6. All right, thank you.
Apparently Fish and Game can count to 12, but we're having problems in our committee. So with the vote being 13 to 6, the OTPE motion will be the recommendation of the committee to the whole House on a minority. Who's going to write the minority report?
Seeing no other hand, I guess I am.
Representative Harvey will be writing the minority report. I'll be writing the majority report. And with
Question for the chair.
yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, is the minority report required on every vote?
They can choose to waive it.
Okay, that, I just wanted to.
Yep, you can choose. If you're going to write one, I need to know that. If you're not, then I need to know that just so I can plan.
I
So
just want to make that clear, because I know we've asked for the last two bills, or the last couple of bills for minority reports, and sometimes there may not be a minority report. So-
absolutely. So no, that minority can waive off, just unfortunately, there has to be a majority report, but the minority report can waive off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And with that, I close the executive session on House Bill 1299 and move on to House Bill 1308 and recognize Representative Howard. And I open the executive session on House Bill 1308 and I recognize Representative Howard for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion of ITL on 1308.
It's been moved ITL by Representative Howard and be seconded by
Second.
Representative Allard. The motion on the floor, motion in the committee is ITL on House Bill 1308, and it's open to further discussion. Seeing none, the clerk, are you looking for time? You're looking for, you want to say something?
I do need time, but I do want to say something. I guess it's impossible to move it now because I was typing, but I do have an amendment. I don't want to kill this bill. The amendment not only gets rid of the seizure of hair, which solves the potential constitutional issue, but what it does is it allows the existing clubs to continue to train on their own live hares that they have. They made quite a bit of testimony about how they had veterinarian checks, that they were taking care of these animals properly, that they were breeding reasonably well. And if that's the case, they should be able to propagate their own. Now, having said that, I had heard comments about, well, what about the gene pool? And what about if there's kind of a mass extinction event? There are 5 different clubs. If they each have a population of hare that they're propagating, they can trade, keep that gene pool fresh, and act as a backup for each other. So I prefer to see the amendment adopted, which allows the clubs to continue doing everything they're currently doing, and yet takes away the ability to just go and take an animal out of the wild, which really nobody else gets to do. Like we say you can't take an animal out of the wild for pleasure, but for some reason one group is allowed to. So I just wanted to talk to my amendment. I don't suspect it will change anything, but I wanted to put it out there for the record.
Thank you, Representative Reed. Any further discussion on the ITL motion on House Bill 1308?
So,
Representative Harvey.
so I just want to be clear, we are not voting on the amendment. We are voting on the 1308 bill, correct?
That's correct. She
Thank
just
you.
wanted to make members aware that there was an amendment if they wanted to vote against the ITL motion and bring a different motion forward. She wanted to know that there's an amendment. And I'll just speak a little bit. Representative
you.
Reed and I did have a discussion about that amendment, and it was about the constitutional argument I had about the fact that we are taking property from citizens without any kind of due process through the law, and that's a significant problem. And so she wrote an amendment that dealt with that due process issue, basically saying we're not going to take the animals and you don't have to set them free. But I still find that it's the problem I have with the amendment or going forward with an OTP motion is the fact that it's a dead-end road for the clubs, right? Ultimately, they won't have any rabbits, and then it kills the problem. So there's not a solution that gives them light at the end of the tunnel, and I think ITL motion is appropriate. That being said, we'll go to the vote. Madam Clerk, if you could call the roll. A motion is ITL on House Bill 1308.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes.
Representative Close,
Yes.
Representative Spillane,
Yes.
Representative Howard,
Yes.
Representative Craig,
Yes.
Representative Love,
Yes.
Representative Wolf,
Yes.
Representative Kittredge,
Yes.
Representative Allard,
Yes.
Representative Smith,
Yes.
Representative Harvey, Representative Laflamme,
Yes.
Representative Massamilla,
Yes.
Representative King. The clerk votes no. Representative Egan.
Yes.
Oh, 1 second, I typed the wrong thing. Representative Shurtleff.
Yes.
Representative Oxall.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair. The vote is 18 to 1. I consent.
On a vote of 18 to 1, without objection, it'll go on consent. Next up, I'll close the executive session on House Bill 1308 and open the executive session on House Bill 1323 relative to hike safe cars, and I recognize Representative Spillane for a motion. One, two, three.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will move OTP.
So there's been a motion of OTP on House Bill 1323 made by Representative Spillane. Representative Kittredge? Second. It's been moved by Representative Spillane, seconded by Representative Kittredge, OTP on House Bill 1323, and it's open to further amendment. Recognize Representative Spillane. I don't know why it's not working.
Sorry, I don't know why my mic's dead. There was an amendment that was drafted that pulls out everything that has to do with the daily, weekly, or any of that stuff, and all it does is simply make the bill now say that the executive director can establish the fee. So I'm going to move 2022-0151H.
It's been moved by Representative Spillane to adopt Amendment 0151H, and that's seconded by Representative Kittredge. And seconded by Representative Kittredge, and it's open to further discussion. I'll take an opportunity. The Hike Safe program is a phenomenal program within our state. It's working extremely well. What we're looking to do, as long as we had opened this chapter of law for discussion, I was looking to future-proof the legislation to allow Fish and Game to manage the program as they see fit and not have fees set in statute that are hard-coded. And anytime they want to change it, they'd have to come back to us and wait a year to 2 year process to try to get something changed. So what we're just doing is we're striking the language in the amendment for the fees, and we're just giving administrative rules authority for them to set their fees in their own rules so they can manage the program better on a more dynamic basis. Does anybody else have any questions? Seeing none, we're voting on amendment number 2022-0151H, the adoption of that amendment. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Vice Chair. Representative Close.
Yes.
Representative Spillane.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative Craig.
Yes.
Representative Love.
Yes.
Representative Wolf.
Yes.
Representative Kittredge.
Yes.
Representative Allard.
Yes.
Representative Smith.
Yes.
Representative Harvey.
Yes.
Representative Laflamme.
Yes.
Representative Massamilla.
Yes.
Representative King.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Egan.
Yes.
Representative Shurtleff.
Yes.
Representative Oxall.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair.
Chair votes yes.
The vote is 19 to 0.
So on a unanimous vote, the amendment is adopted. The new motion is ought to pass as adopted. Is there any further discussion on OTPA? Yep. Representative Spillane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just make this comment that I think that the amendment is a great thing. It actually fixes it to help the program be more dynamic. They can now, without coming back to the legislature to fix a rate or a fee that they need to increase or decrease, they can do that themselves. And it also allows them flexibility should they decide to set a fee for out-of-state in the future that is a different fee than we pay for residents. They can have a non-resident versus resident fee structure. It's completely under the control of them now, and they can let this program grow as it dynamically needs to grow.
Thank you. Representative Egan.
The best thing I can say for the fine representative from Representative Spillane, is I concur, rather than complete, right on target. I think this makes a better bill, and I'll support it.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion of OTPA ought to pass as amended on House Bill number 1323? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes.
Representative Close,
Yes.
Representative Spillane,
Yes.
Representative Howard,
Yes.
Representative Craig,
Yes.
Representative Love,
Yes.
Representative Wolf,
Yes.
Representative Kittredge,
Yes.
Representative Allard,
Yes.
Representative Smith,
Yes.
Representative Harvey,
Sorry, yes.
Representative Laflamme,
Yes.
Representative Massamilla,
Yes.
Representative King.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Egan,
Yes.
Representative Shirtliff,
Yes.
Representative Oxal,
Yes.
and Mr. Chair.
Chair votes yes on a unanimous vote. Motion of OTPA is adopted as a committee recommendation, and without objection, it will go on consent. Unanimous 19-0.
Clerk needs a minute.
Yep. We're going to close the committee, the executive session on House Bill 1323 and open the executive session on House Bill 1356. And the chair is going to make a motion of OTP. Looking to Representative Craig.
Second.
It's been moved by the chair of OTP, seconded by Representative Craig. It's open to further amendment. The chair offers amendment number 0166H. And looking for a second.
Second.
So it's been moved to adopt amendment number 0166H, and I'll speak to this amendment. So we had a significant amount of conversation around this bill, one of our longer committee meetings. The thing that I took out of the bill and what I've learned in doing this and why I drafted this amendment is the amount of damage that gray squirrels do to our agriculture community and to our residents as a whole, the damage to buildings and such. The second thing I learned in this is that with the exception of the beaver, I think this is the only rodent that we actually have season for. All other red squirrels, you can hunt whenever you want. Gophers, you can hunt whenever you want. Porcupines, you can hunt whenever you want. But for some reason, we've pulled out gray squirrels and said, no, we're going to set some sort of limited season on gray squirrels. And considering the damage I've done, I think we all remember Squirrel Armageddon a couple of years ago where you couldn't go five feet down the road without seeing a flattened squirrel. I don't believe that this is an endangered species. I don't think that we're in a problem that we're going to find we're short of gray squirrels. And on top of that, we don't live in Tennessee. I don't think there's a significant portion of our hunting communities out there hunting gray squirrels. My point taken. So that being said, I think it's appropriate that we not have a season on this rodent. That people be allowed to take it whenever they feel like it. That again, it's not an endangered species. It's not a herd population, a deer population we're trying to manage, or a moose population we're trying to manage the size of the herd, and that they're not at risk of extinction by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm sure our homeowners are having problems with bird feeders and chicken coops and everything else. They'll also appreciate the fact that they don't have to run the risk of potentially having to prove that the reason they shot a squirrel was because it was damaging property and having to go through that with Fish and Game. Now it's just going to be, if the squirrel's damaging property, you can shoot it, and you're not going to run the risk of potentially being charged with a crime. So with that, we'll open it up for further discussion. Representative Harvey.
Thank you. So I have two problems. We have heard numerous times this morning and in the hearing, which I did attend via live stream, by the way, that it is up to Fish and Game to set limits and seasons and so forth, and that we have a great deal of confidence in their ability and their wisdom in doing so, and yet this amendment takes that away from them. You are setting a season of a non-season, and not letting them do exactly the job that we've said all morning they're very capable of doing. So that's an issue. I also have a little bit of a problem with sometimes comparing animals. I think Fish and Game has done a great job of setting seasons for each individual animal, whether it's a squirrel or a porcupine or a fox or a whatever, and not trying to lump them together because each one has its own characteristics, its own part in the food chain, and so forth. So I don't support this amendment at all. Thank you.
Thank you, and I am going to answer the question as to why I stepped aside from this conversation of seasons and setting seasons for Fish and Game. And I when I drafted this amendment, I had that exact argument in mind. I'm like, I don't necessarily like doing this. But the reason I'm doing it is because the legislature has broad shoulders. And this issue has obviously created a pretty significant divide between our various, I won't say parties, but just issues of, the animal rights conservationists and the hunters, so to speak. And that putting Fish and Game in that political squabble, for lack of a better phrase, I think is inappropriate. Is that I think that the legislature has the broad shoulders to take this on. If we choose to pass this vote, then we take the weight on it. And we take the weight from those organizations and not Fish and Game. I'd rather not put the weight on Fish and Game and have them in the middle of a political argument. I'd rather them or a partisan argument, so to speak. I'd rather them focus on conserving the animals that our deer, our fish, our moose, our bear, all the other animals in the state that are generally nonpartisan, non-political, right? So they're not nearly as divided as we heard the testimony on this bill. And so to answer your question, the reason I did it is because I'm trying to take weight off Fish and Game. Yes, I recognize that this is a divergence from the statement I usually make, which is they're doing a great job, let them do their job. But in this case, it's not as simple as science, so to speak, that there's passions that come into play on this. And we heard it. We had 2.5-hour argument or discussion and hearing on lactating gray squirrels. And so I think that I want to take the weight off Fish and Game. I want to make this, I'm going to take the weight on, and it's my amendment, and I'm the one that I think is it's appropriate for us to decide that this is an inappropriate use of Fish and Game's time and have the bill pass. Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have this argument every year over pretty much every bill. To what extent do we let Fish and Game do their jobs, and to what extent do we take over? This is certainly not the first time. We can go through any number of species, coyotes, bobcats, you name it. However, in the past, the argument has always been made that the commission did not decide in unison with their own biologists, and that's why we were putting forward bills and had bills before us. This is something nobody's asked for. In fact, for as far as damage done by squirrels, we already have year-round open season on squirrels that do damage. We already can kill as many squirrels that do damage as we want. This is specifically in regards to hunting. I have, being from Tennessee, have tasted squirrel meat myself. But in regards to hunting, nobody has asked for this. Now, I think good faith process usually involves two sides attempting to move towards each other, understand each other's arguments, but instead what we have is one side saying, look, this looks like a typographical error. Everybody around us is doing it at this time. Why can't we move it 2 weeks one way? And then the other side going, actually, we're going to make it the other extreme from where it already was, where it was historically for the last 100 years. I just don't think that this is a good process. And I will be voting against this amendment.
Thank you. Representative Allard. And then
Thank-
Representative Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. many of you won't know me because I am very new to the committee, and actually, I watched the testimony via YouTube, unable to be here. And I was concerned about the testimony that we were receiving regarding some number of orphaned baby squirrels. And so, being fortunate enough to know a small pool of retired wildlife biologists, both in New Hampshire and Vermont, I decided to consult my friends on what this issue might be. And I received two very rapid responses. The first of which was, have you ever seen a squirrel hunter in New Hampshire? Alluding to the fact that it is a very small percentage of our small game hunters who actually hunt gray squirrels. But the second was the most telling, and said, if there are orphaned baby squirrels, we need to look first at the tragedy of roadkill. Far more of our squirrels are being taken from the environment by our automobiles than ever by a hunter. And so I think this bill, as originally proposed, would not solve that problem because there just aren't the numbers of hunters that were going to change the numbers of orphans versus automobiles. So I leave that to your better judgment.
Thank you, Representative Allard. Representative Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I seem to recall that the motivation for the underlying bill was that a complaint that the department was not responsive to requests and was not a lack of satisfaction with the department's response by not changing the season. So I just find that an interesting argument that we should trust them now in opposition to the amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Laflamme?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to refresh memories, the original bill was to allow the hunting season for gray squirrels to be delayed while they were weaning their young. And with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, this amendment takes the weight off of Fish and Game for deciding when the hunting season should be, and basically has the legislature declaring the gray squirrel as a nuisance animal which should be hunted and killed on site. And I don't feel very good about that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we're voting on the adoption of Amendment 2022-0166H. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes.
Representative Close,
Yes.
Representative Spillane,
Yes.
Representative Howard,
Yes.
Representative Craig,
Yes.
Representative Love,
Yes.
Representative Wolf,
Yes.
Representative Kittredge,
Yes.
Representative Allard,
Yes.
Representative Smith,
Yes.
Representative Harvey,
No.
Representative Laflamme.
No.
Thank you. Representative Massimilla,
Yes.
Representative King.
No.
The clerk votes no. Representative Egan,
Yes.
Representative Shurtleff,
No.
Representative Oxow,
No.
1 second, please.
Chair votes yes.
I was getting to you. I just messed up my numbers. And Mr. Chair,
Chair votes yes.
the vote is 12 to 7.
On a vote of 12 to 7.
I'm sorry. What did I do?
2 yeses on the Dem side.
I had Representative Egan, and who was the other yes? Massimilla. I apologize.
So on a vote of 13 to 6, the amendment is adopted. The new motion is ought to pass as adopted. Is there any further discussion? Representative Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are a nuisance animal. We've heard a lot of testimony on this about how much damage they do. For the most part, hunters wouldn't hunt them in the summer anyways because you can't see them up in the foliage. So I don't think hunting would have any effect on their presence in the state. And I support the bill as amended.
Thank you. Further discussion. Representative Laflamme?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to vote no on the motion OTP as amended for the reasons I gave earlier. I think it's the purview and the responsibility and the duty, or whatever you want to use the word for Fish and Game to declare if gray squirrels should be hunted at will, and it should not be something that the legislature should just declare.
Thank you. Representative Egan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have to concur with my colleague that we talk a lot about the rulemaking authority of Fish and Game and not stepping into their world and giving them the room to utilize the information that their biologists, their scientists give to them in managing wildlife. And I think that it's important that we try to keep that logic in mind as we vote on this bill. So I would not be in favor of this.
Thank you. Representative King, right? Representative King.
I'd concur with my colleagues. I'd have to vote against this.
Thank you. Representative Harvey and Representative Wolf, can you turn off your microphone?
So I understand your point of view that you want to take the load off Fish and Game. However, that is their job. That's why we appoint them. That's why they serve. It is their job. Whether it's a pleasant job or not is not the issue. It is their job to set limits and set seasons despite what the general public may or may not think. It is also their job to follow through with the petition process, which did not happen in this particular case. So it's hard for me to say, well, on one hand, they don't have to do their job because it's unpleasant, it's partisan, and on the other hand, we say they have to do their job because it is their job. I also do not believe that wildlife in New Hampshire should be a partisan issue. I think, good wildlife management benefits all of New Hampshire and the tourist that comes in to our state, and so I would not like to see this bill or any bill become a partisan issue. Thank you.
Further discussion. Seeing none, clerk, the motion on the table is ought to pass as amended with amendment number 0166H. The clerk will call the roll.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes.
Representative Close.
Yes.
Representative Spillane.
Yes.
Representative Howard.
Yes.
Representative Craig.
Yes.
Representative Love.
Yes.
Representative Wolf.
Yes.
Representative Kittredge.
Yes.
Representative Allard.
Yes.
Representative Smith.
Yes.
Representative Harvey.
No.
Representative Laflamme.
No.
Representative Massamilla.
Yes.
Representative King.
No.
The clerk votes no. Representative Egan.
No.
One moment. Representative Shurtleff.
No.
Representative Oxall.
No.
Mr. Chair.
Chair votes yes.
And now the vote should be 12 to 7.
On a vote of 12 to 7, the ought to pass motion is adopted as a committee recommendation. Will there be a minority report, and if so, who will be writing it?
I guess I'll write it.
Representative Reed will write it. I will write the majority report. With that, I close the executive session on House Bill 1356 and move on to the executive session. Open the executive session on House Bill 1631 and recognize Representative Smith for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to ITL HB 1631 FN.
It's been moved by Representative Smith and second by Representative Allard to ITL House Bill. I'm sorry, Representative Shirtliff. Apologize for that, Mr. Speaker.
Both good looking, so.
Yeah, I can see I'm confused. The ITL on House Bill 1631. I'll give it to Representative Smith to discuss his ITL motion, and then I have a comment I'm going to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this bill was drafted on behalf of a constituent who was disabled. If you were here at the last public hearing, I read the testimony of the person. This bill is paved with good intentions, but just because it's paved with good intentions doesn't mean it's a good bill. It's got many flaws. The biggest one is financial impact to Fish and Game. That's an estimate that's really hard to come up with at this time. So at this point, the ITL should stand.
Thank you. I'm going to make a comment on this bill. You'll see an amendment I'm passing around on this bill. Originally, I looked at trying to figure out, I'm concerned as we go forward in the legislature, every time we force Fish and Game into giving a discount, that affects their revenue, right? They're going to have an increased number of hunters, but less money to be able to support those same number of hunters, and they're funded through fees. And so their only avenue would be if they give a discount to one hunter, they got to raise the price for another hunter for the program. And I think that's diminishing returns, where they're going to get to a point where they can't do their job. And so my idea was to create a non-lapsing fund that the legislature would fund, that they could draw the difference between what the citizen pays for a discounted and what the full price is, and draw out of that fund the money so that Fish and Game can meet whole, so to speak. I still think that's a great idea. The problem is we didn't have enough time to execute it and to do it right. So I gave out the amendment that I started drafting and worked on. The other problem with it was when I finally got the number from Fish and Game on their expectation, because of this bill and the fact that we're looking at all disabled people, not just veterans, not just paraplegics, the number was $1.3 million roughly they were estimating, because they were looking at how many people are, looking at census data for how many people are fully disabled in the state of New Hampshire, and what a potential of only 10% of those people apply for licenses, what would that look like? And, it was an ugly number. Right, and so I wasn't ready to bring a dollar figure to fund the fund go through. I did have a conversation with the Speaker's office, and if we had come to a decent resolution, they were willing to send it over to probably Ways and Means, because it's going to be a new permanent fund that we'd be doing. However, it just isn't quite ready for prime time. But I want to establish within the committee this concept of every time we give a discount, Fish and Game's the one that pays the price, and our hunters are the ones that pay the price, because the fees come from the hunters and from the trappers and from licenses. And so the only way Fish and Game can make up that gap is to raise prices. So the legislature decides that we think citizens should get a discount, and then we make every hunter and fisherman pay for it, right? And if we're going to do that, if we, the legislature, decide that we're going to give a discount, then we, the legislature, should fund that and fund that differential so that agency can continue to do the enforcement model that it needs. So I'm not expecting any action on my amendment. I gave it to you, so hopefully maybe, depending on what happens in the next election, depending on who's in charge, someone might bring forward an amendment or a bill that might fill this need and fix the problem. But we do have a diminishing returns problem with Fish and Game, and I am concerned about it as the legislature keeps doing this kind of work. And with that, Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I agree with you on making sure we fund that, making sure that the department has access to general funds. I also had spoken about an amendment that I also, after speaking with OLS and after speaking with the licensing division of the department, realized it was far too large of a legislative change to bring forward as an amendment. But I would like to see it likewise as a future bill, and that is the idea that we have this kind of quilt, this patchwork, hodgepodge kind of discounting and free license structure, and we're giving away these licenses to people who would otherwise certainly buy those licenses, but we're giving it away based on things like previous occupation in terms of veteran status, disability, and age. In every single one of those populations, there are people who are perfectly capable of buying those licenses, and there are people who are not. If we stop giving the people who are capable of buying the licenses free licenses, and instead change the discount to simply an income base, in my discussions with people, we talked about something like 2x the poverty line or something like that, then what we're doing is we're getting rid of all of the revenue loss the department is experiencing, and we are bringing more people into hunting. We're getting more people out in the woods, and I would add, those are the right people to get out in the woods because those are the people most likely to need to use the meat, who are literally, it's not even necessarily a sport, have to feed their families. So that's the thought that I've had for the last several terms every time we have one of these bills with a discount. I think it's good for the department to increase their revenue. I think it's good to get the right people out in the woods. And having said that, I chose not to pursue an amendment because it was too large for this particular time.
Thank you, Representative Reed. Further comments? Representative Wolf.
Would it make sense to pass the amendment and then interim study the bill?
Again, I had thought about that, but again, I don't think I did it this way for particular reasons because I think we can ITL it. People have seen the amendment. They can, these committee members are passionate about fish and game, and they can bring forward a new bill next term. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll. The motion is ITL on House Bill 1631.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes.
Representative Close,
Yes.
Representative Spillane,
Yes.
Representative Howard,
Yes.
Representative Craig,
Yes.
Representative Love,
Yes.
Representative Wolf,
Yes.
Representative Kittredge,
Yes.
Representative Allard,
Yes.
Representative Smith,
Yes.
Representative Harvey,
Yes.
Representative Laflamme,
Yes.
Representative Massimilla,
Yes.
Representative King.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Egan,
Yes.
Representative Shirtliff,
Yes.
Representative Oxal,
Yes.
and Mr. Chair.
Chair votes yes.
The vote is 19-0, and I'm quite sure of that math.
On 19-0, without objection, it will go on consent. With that, I'll end the executive session of House Bill 1631, and that concludes all the business in front of the Fish and Game Committee. I want to thank everybody. I don't know if we're going to have any Senate bills coming over once we have crossover, but if we do, I'll be happy to see your smiling faces sometime in after March. So thank you very much, guys. Have a great day. Meeting's adjourned. Give me 5 minutes. I need to run over to transportation because I have a bill at 10:30 in transportation. I got to go.